Hello everyone, welcome to Spatial Exploits, a new YouTube channel dedicated to exploring the beautiful game's players, teams, and managers from a tactical perspective. In today's video, we're going to get started by looking at the UEFA Champions League Final for 2021. And the final was played in Porto, Portugal, and featured Manchester City and Chelsea Football Club from the English Premier League. So without further ado, let's get started. Let's begin by reviewing the starting 11 for each team. For Manchester City, Pep Guardiola fielded a 4-3-3 starting lineup with Kevin De Bruyne here in the false 9 positioning with Riyad Mahrez to his right and Raheem Sterling to his left. Both Sterling and Mahrez would be expected to drift out wide while this team has possession in order to provide the necessary width. With the midfield, you have İlkay Gündoğan in the holding role and Phil Foden to the left, Bernardo Silva to the right. And then in defense, you have Stones and Diaz forming their brilliant partnership alongside Ederson as well in goal. And that three-man trio here has been a clean sheet keeping machine in the Premier League. So the idea is that they would hold true today to form and provide a clean sheet for City. With Kyle Walker in right back and Alexander Zinchenko at left back. For Chelsea and Thomas Tuchel, you have the familiar formation with Edouard Mendy in goal, with a three-man defensive line of Rudiger, Thiago Silva, and Cesar Azpilicueta. In the wing-back positionings, you have Ben Chilwell to the left and Reece James to the right. And in the midfield, you have Jorginho and Kanté, with Kanté having more of the box-to-box role and drifting up and down and left and right throughout the match to provide both the defensive structure as well as elements of the attack, with Mason Mount and Kai Havertz linking up play with Timo Werner up top. A starting lineup of this type for both teams kind of tells us a couple of clues as to how the game will unfold. From Pep Guardiola's side, there was a big move to keep Alexander Zinchenko up into this final and have him be starting over Joao Cancelo. With Cancelo, especially in the Dortmund match in the Champions League earlier on, he had been very, very reckless with the passing, and so that was a very losing proposition for City in a match of this kind where you have one shot to win it all. So with Zinchenko, you could see why Pep had him here. He provides much more defensive structure as well as he can move into the midfield just like Cancelo can to build up play, but he's not going to be as aggressive with the passing as a Cancelo would. So City can retain the possession a little bit better. With İlkay Gündoğan, that was the hot topic issue where not that he didn't deserve a place in the starting 11, he certainly does, given the league-leading goals he has had for City this season. Just a tremendous season all around for him, but was this the right role for him? And if he didn't want to play this role during the game and move around, who else would be able to fill in there? And those were a few of the questions that could have been maybe better answered had Raheem Sterling not been started. And what we're saying here is with Phil Foden moving into Sterling's position, for example, and had Sterling been left out of the lineup, then you can have Gündoğan going to where Foden is, and then this position would be empty. And that's where you could have Rodri or Fernandinho playing that holding role that they've been so excellent in all season long. The issue with Rodri not being there is because in the last match against Chelsea, he was not able to really retain the possession. He was also, just like Cancelo, quite a bit reckless with his passing, and in a midfield structure like that, you can't have that. So maybe Pep felt a little bit more confident, going a little bit more attack heavy, knowing that maybe the age of Fernandinho couldn't last the 90 minutes, or with Rodri, just the quality hadn't been there in the last few weeks. And Gündoğan was a trusted member of the team all along, so maybe he could have filled this role in brilliantly. And with City being more attack-minded, able to hold the possession a little bit better, they could have spotted an early goal against Chelsea, putting Chelsea on the back burner. With Thomas Tuchel, one of the things that stand out is the way that Chelsea defend. When you have a lineup of this type, where you have a three-man defensive line, obviously goals are not going to be allowed pretty easily. And that is exactly what we've seen with a Chelsea side who was leaking goals with Lampard and with Tuchel. They've been very, very sound defensively. And in one of the ways that this can happen is the whole team kind of moves off to the side and to either side together. And that is nice. But the other thing that also happens is a sort of like a crunching of the defense can take place where Chilwell and Rudiger and Thiago Silva, Azpilicueta, and James can all form a five-man back line, with Jorginho moving in deeper, Kanté also moving in deeper, and Mount being here where Chilwell would have been, and Havertz being here where James would have been. And then that allows Werner to press the opposition center defensive midfielders as well as the center defensive partners. And once that pressure has been made, City can then not build up play as quickly or as efficiently as they would have wanted to. So that's one route that they could take. Chelsea also, when they win the ball back in these deeper positionings, is usually with their defense or with Mendy stopping the ball and then getting the attack going. So you could see something like this also take place, which is you have Mendy getting the ball off of his save. Then he passes the ball to Azpilicueta, who now has the ability to pass it to James. So James goes to here and gets the ball. Then Chelsea can have this accordion-like effect take place where you have immediately the entire team on the counter, but everybody just spreads out wide. And because everyone's spreading out wide, that allows much more room for everybody to operate in, and that gets the ball moving closely. You can go back to Conte here as well. Then you can have a cross-field pass to Mount. Everybody continues to move up, and then you can have a cross into Werner, and potentially that leading into a goal as well. So these are all the ways that kind of Chelsea can play defensively as well as offensively, but this accordion-like effect when they're going from defense to offense is exactly what allows Chelsea to get onto the counter fast, and when they get there fast, they can go ahead and make all the attacking moves that they need to make. So this is how the two teams kind of began the match. And let's move to the first initial few minutes. Okay, so in the opening first few minutes, both teams are getting a feel for either side and really figuring out where the little openings are. And that leads to a Timo Werner break where he ends up playing the ball against Stones, and then really the ball just goes out of bounds. And Werner is somewhere off to the pitch here. And as he's coming back into play, Reece James takes the appropriate throw in, and that ends up finding the ball to Cesar Azpilicueta. James moves back into the field of play. Azpilicueta takes a look around, see there's no other options, goes back to James, who's slightly more open than him. James, unfortunately, has the option to pass it to a Werner, who's really just trudging back along, but completely offsides. And then Havertz is really not all that open either, and a cross doesn't really seem likely, given the pressure from Zinchenko, Sterling, and Foden. So James then passes it back to Azpilicueta, who then moves a little bit to see where the action is. Really, going forward is no option, so he goes to Thiago Silva, who does have a little bit more room, but at the same time you can see the entire City team now starting to move back up into play, and that means Thiago Silva also is out of options, unless he can do a really quick, long pass under pressure from De Bruyne. So instead of trying to tackle that puzzle, Thiago Silva just goes right back to Mendy to reset play, and at the same time everybody then starts to move back in, and City as well allows their defensive structure to also absorb that time of pressure. So by the end of the move here, you have City and Chelsea back into their respective positioning where they started the match, and really you have Gundogan holding back, and Chilwell is also moved back here. And really this is to indicate the type of pressure that Chelsea and City are both feeling and causing to one another, and where really the progression into each other's 18-yard boxes is not really going well. But that's a testament to the type of structure that both teams have. So to start off this attack, they'll go back to Thiago Silva and then Azpilicueta, and the match proceeds onwards from there. And all of this kind of occurred in the first 2:24 mark is where all this action took place. At the 3:49 mark in the match, you can see the type of influence that Chelsea's defensive structure as well as N'Golo Kante's influence is going to have on the match. So what has led to the 3:49 mark has been a Kai Havertz shot on goal saved by Ederson, and that has now gotten City off to building up play from the back. So Ederson passes the ball from himself to Stones. Stones takes a look to see if there's any options between him and Walker. There aren't because of Mount's pressing, so he distributes the ball to Bernardo Silva, and now that allows Walker to make a cut up here. Mount tries to shadow him, then Jorginho pressures Silva. That allows Foden to move into this space, and Kante starts trailing him. And all this time, Bernardo Silva has basically looked around to see if there's any options. There aren't because of the massive coverage here from Chelsea, so he goes right back to Stones. And here is where he sees a spot open for Gundogan, so he passes him the ball. And that's where a funny thing happens. So while this pass is being made from Stones to Gundogan, Kante sees that, he leaves Foden to go start pressuring Gundogan, and Rudiger presses up to Foden, and then Thiago Silva moves to where De Bruyne is, and Azpilicueta comes in here too. So this is how Chelsea's been able to maintain that structure, but the key comes from Foden noticing this Bernardo Silva move back to Stones, leading to extra space here because Jorginho had to pressure Silva. And because of all those puzzle pieces kind of shifting around, Phil Foden, being the smart talent that he is, he moved into this open space. But Conte, instead of sticking to him and trusting Werner to go back to Gundogan, he didn't do that. He actually just moved right back here and then got to Gundogan. Again, didn't work out, so goes back to Stones. And this is the exact kind of setup that Chelsea ran with the whole match. And this is really interesting to see that this came into play really early into the opening stages. At the 7-11 mark of the game here, we have this situation unfolding. Both teams up to this point have had a chance to create their own possession, and Chelsea in fact has had a couple chances on goal already. And so now we're going to see Ederson pull off something remarkable. So to kick things off, he passes the ball off to Diaz. Diaz then gives the ball back to him immediately. And now Stones comes in, so that brings Mount a little bit closer, Werner a little bit closer as well. And once all this has kind of taken place, what Ederson notices, and this is the brilliance of his playmaking ability, is that there's an open lane here throughout the entire defense where if he takes that route one pass, good things could happen. So what he does is he kicks the ball here all the way through, and that means James is immediately rushing back, Azpilicueta is rushing back, Thiago Silva is also trying to get back, and what he's trying to do is get Sterling that ball and goal scoring opportunity, hopefully in a one-on-one situation if he can beat Reece James for pace. And so Sterling gets the ball and really takes a really bad touch in a way where it doesn't really allow him to control the ball to the side of the foot that he would want, and so that allows Reece James to also come in, and then eventually within Mendy's goal here, it's just not going to work out, and so the ball goes out of bounds and there's a corner kick for Man City. But it's part and parcel due to Ederson that this whole thing began anyways, and the fact that Sterling couldn't bring it in is just an afterthought, but in the fact that if he had been able to brought it in, it would have been either a one-on-one directly with Mendy, or a really Reece James could have caught up, and then that could have caused problems too. So this play showed a couple of things. One is, again, Ederson's long-range ability of passing to really just split a defense open, but it also showed us the remarkable pace that Reece James has, because he kept up with Raheem Sterling throughout, and then actually got a pivotal touch that prevented Sterling from actually having ability to get to Mendy. So yet again, City's great maneuvering allows these opportunities to come to the forefront. With the high intensity of the opening minutes out of the way, there was another build-up play that happened that also deserves some attention, because this was the game's first punch and counter punch. And so what we see is this kind of a setup here at the 8:54 mark of the game, and you have Ederson really slightly coming out of his box, but really the whole City team defensively is pushed to the right side of the field. And here you have a couple of options. So Rudiger has the ball, he can go to Thiago Silva, and because the whole City team is pushed to the right like this, he also has a long ball option into Reece James. The problem is he has time, but not enough time, because you have already Mahrez pushing in, you have De Bruyne about to activate onto Rudiger as well. So Rudiger takes a little bit of time, and then he puts a really great pass through the defense. The issue is by that time Stones has kind of come back and Werner has made his run, but Walker has followed right along with him, and what ends up happening is Stones gets the ball, Diaz moves up here as well, and then he basically mishits the ball in trying to clear it, so it goes right back to Havertz, and now everybody's kind of moving back into their own structure as well, trying to get back. And as this kind of unfolds into play here, you have a couple things happening. So Mount is making this run into the defense as well, and so Havertz takes the ball, he goes into Mount, and then Werner comes into here, and Walker now starts to see Mount is coming in with the ball, so he then tries to press on him, except what happens is Mount goes right back to Havertz, who has the pass here. So then while Havertz has the ball here, he goes and attacks into the opposite 18-yard box. Walker is here, so Havertz comes with the ball here, and then eventually he beats him for pace. So now there's an actual opportunity for Ederson to go ahead and make some of his fine defensive plays. So with Stones and Diaz coming back here, Zinchenko is also back. Werner makes his cut into the box. And now there's this opportunity at hand for Werner off of the ball from Havertz to come here and then has a shot on goal, so he shoots it, but he scuffs the pass. And because he scuffs the pass, that does allow Walker to come back in here as well. So now, by this point, even Conte is like deep into the 18-yard box as well. So these are good things to keep in mind, kind of reorganizing the team defensively. So Foden comes back in, Gundogan also comes back in, Mount is somewhere in this area, Chilwell is hanging out here. So as the team kind of attacks this counter, what happens is, with Werner scuffing the ball here, his shot, it lands into Walker in the box, and then Walker basically hoofs it all the way up to De Bruyne, who has now found himself here. And because he's been finding himself here, James goes to attack him, Sterling, Azpilicueta come here, and what ended up happening is De Bruyne heads the ball as best as he can onto the path of Sterling, and the Sterling then gets an open attack that he can start launching with the rest of the team in tow. So you have Sterling come into here carrying the ball, Azpilicueta, Thiago Silva, everybody, James even coming back here. So now you have this immediate counter attack from City, where you have Foden as well coming in, Rudiger tries to get back, Thiago Silva, everybody's progressively moving back as well as quickly as they can. And while this is happening, Mendy is getting himself ready to take a shot on, and so Sterling by this time has carried it all the way here. You have Reece James trying to trail back and keeping up with him, De Bruyne trying to attack into the box, Foden you have attacking into the box, Rudiger as well. You have Mahrez also on this other side. But now what has happened is Chilwell spots this and he starts making the run as well, and Jorginho also drops back. And so Chilwell tries to make his run, because what has happened, unfortunately, is because James has been kind of left back here, Thiago Silva has had to move to cover De Bruyne, and then Rudiger has to move to cover Foden. So as they're getting into the box, this is kind of the layout you find yourself in. Jorginho hasn't been fast enough to keep up with Mahrez. So just moving everybody a little bit back again to really drive home the point. You have basically an option unfolding for Sterling, which is if you aim a pass through the box all the way to Mahrez, that could be the way in. And so that's exactly what he does. He comes to basically this area, and then while this is still unfolding, you have Chilwell coming back in as fast as he can, Jorginho really trudging along as well. And so Sterling takes the ball, passes it all the way through the goal, and here into the box for Mahrez to catch on to. The issue is, by the time Mahrez gets there, you have Chilwell, who's already caught up, and he puts in a brilliant last-ditch tackle to get the ball back to where it needs to be, which is back into Chelsea hands. So this maneuvering from Chilwell is really what came down to it, and once Chilwell had the ball properly taken care of, Chelsea were able to retain it again and get going back into their possession. So this is a classic example of a quick, scintillating counterattack from City that ended up with a great tackle by Ben Chilwell to really retain the possession and prevent a point-blank shot on goal from Riyad Mahrez. At the 13:19 to 13:20 mark of the game, there was a interesting play that happened that led to a direct chance on goal for Chelsea. So here's the positioning of all the players as we find them at 13:19. We have Stones, the only one dropping back, with Ederson. Foreseeably, he's not in the frame of the camera, but you would assume that he's been pressing up as well out of his goal. So Diaz takes the ball into a very congested midfield, and he tries to see if he can sneak a pass in through to Bernardo Silva or to Mahrez or Walker, because there's only really Mount and Chilwell there covering them. So what Diaz does is he tries to really get a pass going in this direction, and that causes Jorginho to move up to follow Silva, except Mount intercepts the pass, and he can't quite control the pass either, so he ends up siphoning it off to the Jorginho's direction. Jorginho figures that out and really sorts out nicely and gets the pass back to Mount. Mount then takes it, does a bit of dribbling with the ball to get it past the halfway line, and at that point, Walker's now starting to trail back as well. Mahrez is starting to trail back. Chilwell notices something brewing in the works, so he starts to make this maneuver. And as that happens, you have Mount going here, and the rest of the team is also now starting to figure out what's going on. So that Stones is dropping back, Werner is now starting to make his run, Diaz as well is coming back in, Havertz also doing the same, Foden, Conte, all sprinting towards goal. You have Zinchenko as well on the left-hand side coming back into the play. We're going to leave these other players off to the side for now. These guys do start to trail back, but they're not going to be relevant in the field here. And so what happens is you have Walker pulling in, and that allows this pass to be made from Mount onto rushing Chilwell. So he takes the ball here, and so Walker then has to drop back. Stones has to come through here. Mount is progressing forwards. Same thing for Gundogan, Werner. Everybody's just piling into the open goal scoring opportunity here. So everybody's moving back in. Kante as well. And what ends up happening here is Chilwell carries the ball further up the pitch. And what ends up happening is there's a 1-2 here. So Bernardo Silva has caught up at that point, and Chilwell tries to get the ball over to Mount, except Stones intercepts it. But he doesn't do a really good job of intercepting it and bringing it under control, so Mount yet again takes it, splits the defense between Mount and Stones with his dribbling, and comes back in this way. So now you have everybody kind of circling this maneuver, and you have a Werner cutting into goal. So Mount beats Stones in this way, keeps on carrying on to goal. Comes through here, Werner's here, Diaz is also now trailing in. Ederson has clearly moved back into goal. You have Havertz on this side, Kante coming in, Zinchenko, a little bit of Foden, Gundogan as well, and Mount crosses the ball over to Werner. At that point, he's in this location, and Werner has a clear shot on goal. It's just that he can't convert it yet again. At the 14:43 mark in the game, there is a certain set piece that takes place, and that's worth closer attention. One of the things that happens is Reece James is sent to the corner kick area, he takes the ball, and everybody else in the City team, you can see all 10 men here alongside Ederson, waiting for that kick and seeing what is going to come about. You have 3 men in Chelsea's defense settled back in the field, just to ensure that if there is a quick counterattack from City, that they have that under control. So we're going to start the action here with Reece James bringing the ball in. Ederson thankfully catches the ball and starts to investigate how he can initiate a counterattack. So you slowly have everybody on the Man City team starting to make these runs immediately and sprinting as well, as fast as they can. So what you get is this sort of setup where you have Foden on the left, Sterling in the middle of the pitch with Mahrez as well next to him, and then you have De Bruyne on this side all rushing to these 3 men who are now having to track back pretty quickly. And the rest of the team is also sort of fanning out at this point too and starting to get back. You also see a Mason Mount going from here to starting to go in the middle of the pitch like this. He makes a direct run to see if he can pick up one of these other City defenders. And when we go in this way, certain fanning out again keeps taking place. So now Ederson evaluates the situation to see what's going to happen. And he spots a Riyad Mahrez wide open here, so he sends him the ball. And at that point, Mount is somewhere here, so he has to still track back. And as this is happening, everybody here starts to go back, and they're all busting their lungs to make sure that this counter remains intact. So now you have Mahrez as well, starting to go with the ball and carry it. And when you get that kind of an action going, that leads to some good consequential movements up into the offensive half. So for Jorginho, Kante, Chilwell, they're all tracing back and tracking back and running back. And you have Mahrez here just carrying the ball. At some point, he does end up finding Kevin De Bruyne here, so he sends him the ball. And you have Mount tracing back as well now. And before Mahrez gives up the ball, just a split second beforehand, Mount does reach him, but then De Bruyne ends up getting the ball. And at that time, you also have others like Jorginho, you have Thiago Silva now tracing back, Azpilicueta as well. The rest of the Chelsea core defense is now tracing back as well in this manner. So as this is unfolding, you have Kante the furthest back, you have Jorginho on this side trying to get a handle on whether to pick up Foden or Sterling, which is a scary proposition in and of itself. And you have the rest of the team kind of coming at it full steam. So you have Mahrez here, and then Foden, Sterling, everybody coming in. And De Bruyne does a quick little move here in this area to get past Chilwell. So he basically puts him out of the contention to get ahead and get a challenge going. So now you have this kind of setup going, and Mount also at that point makes the run. He officially decides to leave Mahrez, and this is where Conte has a really interesting decisioning to make, because if he gets this wrong, you can see certain elements leading to Chelsea to squander the goal. So Conte makes the decision to go ahead and get into this area with De Bruyne coming at him, and this is a point where now Mount has converged and De Bruyne tries to put a good move beyond to get past Conte. It's just he's not able to do it, and Conte ends up winning the ball. And this is a great move defensively from Conte to figure out between the options that were at hand for De Bruyne, whether to take him on one-on-one or to give the pass off to one of these three men. But instead he decides to go tackle Conte head on, and that doesn't lead to very good outcomes. So that's this play here recycled, and then Conte starts to move the ball back again through the Chelsea team. And it's also up to Mason Mount here to make the cut from this section where he was when the play began, all the way up until this section, where he can then provide that extra bit of angle cutting to make sure that there isn't any open options for De Bruyne other than the one-on-one take-on against Conte, which he wasn't able to get past. Up to this point, we saw quite a few counterattacks, quite a few chances on goal, especially for Chelsea, and then a few City counterattacks as well that led to some goal-scoring chances. But there was a very clear City chance that happened in the 26:50 mark of the match, where there's a setup here on the left-hand side that kind of looks like this, and Man City love to operate in the half spaces. So when they're on the wings here, they do look to see if they can play the ball in these half spaces. And the half spaces would be, this is the left half space, this basic vertical channel, and then this would be the right half space, this vertical channel here. But for the sake of this view, it would be the horizontal channel that you're seeing. And so what City ideally want to do is create overloading in these half spaces. And if they can pivot from the wings into the half spaces to then infiltrate to the middle of the pitch, so the third area, which is critically the most important one, that's basically where they want to operate. So when we look at this setup here, the layout that we see is you have most of City basically holding possession up to this point. You've had a header from Zinchenko that has successfully found Gundogan, and then you have Conte, James, Azpilicueta all trying to man mark these De Bruyne and Raheem Sterling in this area. So what Gundogan does is, after Zinchenko's header, he gets the ball under control, immediately gets a very quick pass off to Raheem Sterling, who utilizes quick thinking to get the ball over to De Bruyne. And what that does in a way is, Azpilicueta is like somewhere back here when Gundogan has the ball. The second he gives it to Sterling, he sees that, and he goes to here to help provide coverage for James, because when Gundogan has the ball, James has been pressuring him to create a potential errant pass from Gundogan here in these left wing areas where there isn't that much space to operate. But this is a testament to City's quick thinking and their caliber of their players, where a quick pass from Gundogan to Sterling gets Azpilicueta to press up on Sterling, which gives him the ball to De Bruyne. De Bruyne takes the ball, starts to dribble with it, and what happens here is now you have Phil Foden going here. Thiago Silva immediately sees the danger, tries to quell it by going this way, and what that means is essentially you have Foden left open. And when you have Foden left open, as he's heading into the penalty area and the 18-yard box, that can be a really bad thing. So Rudiger spots this, and he starts to move over in this direction too. And so while you have De Bruyne going here in this manner, you also have Phil Foden over here also activating. Even though Thiago Silva does his best to ward off any pass into the box, he's not very successful, and De Bruyne gets a pass over to Foden here. And so Foden, by that point, has made his run. Rudiger is right on top of him, and Foden takes a brilliant left-footed flick type of shot on goal to Mendy. It's just that with Rudiger there, he can't do it, and the ball does get blocked, and it goes high up in the air and then comes right back into the waiting arms of Mendy, who then starts a Chelsea possession. This type of a match and game really comes down to how the wings get utilized, as well as how the wings transition into the half spaces. And if that half space transition works out really well, you can create these natural overloads between the offense and the defense, and if the offense is really paying attention, you can get very clear shots on goal. But in this case, it's another testament to how well coached Thomas Tuchel had Chelsea players, where Rudiger covers for Foden, Thiago Silva covers for Azpilicueta, who's now on Sterling, and then Azpilicueta originally started to cover Sterling only because James was too close to Gundogan. And so it is in this way that you have a solid Chelsea defense really stepping up in these first 25 to 30 minutes of the game. And that brings us to the most pivotal play of the entire match, because this is the play that leads to the Kai Havertz goal. So what we have here is the Man City defense is now getting into their defensive shape with Chelsea holding a bit of the ball. So just a few frames before 41-35 here, you do see James going to Azpilicueta, Azpilicueta going to Christensen, Christensen then playing the ball back to Mendy to sort of reset things. Then what happens is Mendy gets the ball to Christensen again. Christensen, at that point, everybody else has kind of moved down here too, so he passes it to Azpilicueta. That means Sterling, De Bruyne, everybody is coming in. And one of the things, to his credit, that Phil Foden does really well in this match is he man marks both Mendy and pressures him, and then also Christensen just in this play. And so initially when Mendy had the ball to go to Christensen, before Christensen went to Azpilicueta, you saw Foden going to Mendy to pressure him, but then the pass happens to Christensen, so then he diverts his run to go and pressure Christensen, who at that time has given the ball to Azpilicueta, which is the situation that we find ourselves in. So as these things are happening, you have De Bruyne pressing in here too, and Rudiger is moving in, and Mahrez is as well. Chilwell a little bit closer here as well to the action. So then Azpilicueta takes a look to see, hey, what lies ahead. Probably playing out to James is an option, but you still have Zinchenko pretty closely tied to him. A dinked ball over to Kanté or Jorginho doesn't quite make sense either. It's kind of rushing things. So he makes the relatively safe play and passes it across defense into the foot of Mendy again. And that means Phil Foden immediately activates back to Mendy, and Mendy then takes a look and sees the layout here that he finds himself in. He notices Rudiger is close to him, so he can do a short pass here, or a short pass back to Christensen, but rather than going back to where the ball just came from, he decides to also skip Rudiger and go directly to Chilwell with a long pass. And this is one of the better passes from the game that we've seen from either goalie. We just covered Ederson's pass a few minutes into the game that led to the brilliant City counterattack that had a Raheem Sterling chance, and this is one of the other goal-making plays from the goaltenders in the game. And with Mendy going to Chilwell here, Walker immediately senses the danger, so he moves up to pressure him. Mount notices this too, but to his credit, Ben Chilwell takes the ball and really just brings it under control and gets it right to Mount. Because Mount is here and Werner and Havertz have now officially tracked back, when they were starting the play at 41-35, they had not tracked back. And with Mount here, Werner here, there's obviously a disconnect happening, so Stone starts to rush him, and that brings Werner into this path here, into this area, and Walker comes back here as well, and because he sees that Chilwell no longer has the ball, Mount is in a more dangerous situation, and this is exactly what leads to Bernardo Silva, Gundogan, everybody's camped out in the left-hand side, and so the ball moved from the left flank here all the way to the goalie, and the City defense just didn't move over quickly enough, and when they did, the core parts of their defense, the last men that can potentially stop the ball, were the ones that had to move to the right-hand side, but that left them exposed to this move here from Kai Havertz. And Mount collects himself on the ball, and then he notices, oh, this lane is wide open, gets the pass over here to Havertz for the critical pass, and at that point, he's through on goal as well. Diaz tries to come back in, Zinchenko tries to come back in, Gundogan, you see him as well in this area trying to get back in time, but really it's just not going to work out. Ederson rushes out of his goal, and it just doesn't really pan out for Man City, so Ederson gets a slight touch on the ball, maybe even collects it with his hands outside of the 18-yard box, and so Havertz then dinks it over him. Havertz gets it into this area where all he's left with is an open goal, so he puts his left foot through onto the ball and gets good contact for Chelsea's first goal. He breaks away for the celebration. Everybody else on the team does the same. And the thing to keep in mind is, we mentioned Christensen here, so Thiago Silva had a groin injury that he pulled up with in the 39th minute, so he gets substituted out, and Thomas Tuchel at his disposal had Christensen already, so he went with him, who was just coming back from injury. With Thiago Silva going off with an injury, he was putting in another player who had just recovered from injury in Christensen. But this whole setup here for the goal really shines a couple of lights on whether Fernandinho would have been able to catch up anyways, or would have Rodri have caught this and really gotten himself in between a Stones and Diaz so that Havertz doesn't have this open lane. And those are some of the questions that we won't know, but we can potentially assume, based on the way that Fernandinho plays defensively, that he would have committed a foul or had himself better tactically positioned to ward off a goal of this type. So 42 minutes into the game, the goal did come for Chelsea, but it was a brilliant counter-attack, and really they caught City sleeping as they were trying to set up the possession. They get it back to Mendy, he gets it to Chilwell, Chilwell takes a really deft touch, gets it to Mount, Mount looks up, sees Havertz, gets it past Ederson, and it's an open shot on goal. Coming out of the halftime break, Chelsea is up 1-0, and both teams have switched directions, so now City is going to be attacking to the right and defending to the left. And coming into this setup here at the 50th minute mark, some context beforehand is Kyle Walker heads the ball over to Ederson, who receives it just before a Chelsea player can get there, and then that leads Diaz to indicate to Ederson, hey, I'm wider open here, so get me the ball. And so Ederson then has the ball over to Diaz. He progresses it up the pitch. Everybody moves along with this action, and then Diaz goes to Zinchenko. Zinchenko then passes it directly back to him. And while this takes place, Chelsea doesn't, uncharacteristically actually up to this point, Chelsea doesn't put enough pressure on Diaz, so he actually has enough room to go ahead and do what he's going to do next, which is launch a pass all the way up to Sterling. So he's going to do a direct route pass all the way up to this section of the pitch. So he sends the pass here in this way. Sterling senses that that's what's coming, so he starts attacking in this way. Azpilicueta, for whatever reason, pushes up slightly, and James can't catch up in this way. So the way Diaz's pass has a trajectory, it initially gets Sterling to come to the inside of James, but then he also circles back to the outside and trying to get under control. So eventually he does get under control in this area, but Reece James is just better up to this point defensively, so he puts one toe up to the ball and gets it out. This is a very important play because this has been showing throughout the game some of the defensive things that have been going on. With Reece James, he's been really just stuck to Raheem Sterling throughout the match, and this play from James actually causes Peter Drury, the CBS commentator here in the United States, to say that James has been adhesive throughout to this point on Raheem Sterling. The other key thing is, over the course of this analysis, you've seen N'Golo Kante make similar defensive contributions. You've also seen Jorginho make them as well, and Mason Mount has been tracking back, Chilwell has been tracking back. So there's just been individual moments of defensive brilliance and contribution throughout the match up to this 50th minute mark, and that has been what has led Chelsea to have the 1-0 advantage. At the 67:40 mark in the game, we have a 1-0 advantage to Chelsea still, and Kevin De Bruyne has been taken out in the 60th minute after his collision with Antonio Rudiger, for which Rudiger got a yellow card, and De Bruyne goes out and Jesus comes in the number 9 shirt here, and Bernardo Silva goes out in the 64th minute, and Fernandinho comes into the game for the first time. For Chelsea, Timo Werner gets taken out in the 66th minute, and Christian Pulisic comes into the game in the number 10 shirt here. So as we go into 67:40, this is the layout of the players on the pitch, and we have a bit of a build-up play from Diaz back to Stones, a bit of short passing, and now Stones sees Foden coming in, dragging Jorginho with him, so he delivers a short pass to Foden. Foden sees Fernandinho here wide open, goes to him, Kante comes in, Jorginho gets here, Foden goes here to make a direct run. At the same time, Jesus and Rudiger come in this way, and so Jorginho is now caught in a bind here a bit, so Fernandinho goes to Jesus, Jorginho tries to catch up to Foden, Jesus notices Foden's making his run, so gets him the ball, then Foden starts carrying the ball deep into the penalty area, the 18-yard box, and from then on, you have Phil Foden dribbling into the box. Then you have Christensen at that point, who has recovered and tracking back for Rudiger. He notices Foden's coming in, so he puts in a challenge here. At the same time, Mahrez is coming in this way too, and so Foden just gets the ball past him to Mahrez. Everybody else is crunching in like this as well, James included. Sterling comes in as well, and Mahrez takes a bit of a touch in this direction and then gets the ball all the way across the face of goal. And really, it's the brilliance of Azpilicueta in defending that the ball just goes really, it's closer to the goal than this image is showing, but really it's in this place, and Azpilicueta is able to clear the ball, and leading to a Man City corner kick. This type of a play in the 67th minute is a good precursor to what is going to unfold for the rest of the match. We are going to see Man City hold the possession of the ball much longer with Fernandinho in the game. Additionally, Gundogan also is now able to push up deeper, and you have Walker and Zinchenko able to move up into this midfield line where Fernandinho resides. And if needed, Fernandinho is able to drop back in this way too to provide that defensive structure and assistance to Diaz and Stones should they need it. But now with Werner out of the game, you have Pulisic and his pace and Havertz and his pace. So it's a little bit less speed at which Chelsea is attacking you with. At the same time, the counter-attack for Chelsea, given their defensive structure, is always in the go, because if they throw the right amount of people behind the ball when defending, once they win it, they're able to, in that accordion-like way that we covered at the beginning, and spread out really quickly. It's just that they're not going to be as quick as they would be with Werner there as well, distracting Stones and Diaz. At the 71:57 mark here, we see this type of a play unfolding where N'Golo Kante has the ball on the right touchline almost, and you have Zinchenko, Fernandinho surrounding him, Sterling really just trying to get back but not providing any pressure. Phil Foden sees Havertz in the middle here between Pulisic as well and Kante, so he tries to rush in this direction, but he's also not getting back quickly. Mount is somewhere in the middle, and just the rest of the Chelsea team is kind of lingering back here. So with Kante, he gives the ball to Pulisic, who puts a quick touch on the ball to backheel it over to Havertz on his path to goal. Diaz, with Pulisic getting the ball, comes in very aggressively, doesn't realize Pulisic is about to do a simple flick over to Havertz and set Havertz free. So that's exactly what happens. Stones starts tracking back, but Havertz is coming at him full speed in this way, and Pulisic is coming in this way too. So he makes the turn on Diaz, gets the pass off first, makes the turn on Diaz, then starts sprinting in this direction. Everybody else is also starting to come back in as well to try to put an end to this really sudden counterattack from Chelsea out of seemingly nowhere. And so with Stones and Havertz, everybody is coming in this direction, Diaz as well, but he's now basically been left in Pulisic's wake, and Havertz comes into this area, siphons off the ball over to Christian Pulisic here, and then he takes the ball and starts going at Ederson's goal. And with Diaz even trying to come back, it's just not going to be enough, and so Ederson starts to prepare himself for battle here, and with everybody trying to circle back in, it's an open shot on goal for Christian Pulisic, and he tries to hit it in this area, and it simply doesn't really pan out, and so he basically angles the shot off this way, and it goes basically glancing off of the left post. It's a missed chance for Pulisic and Chelsea. It's one of the bigger ones in the game, and this would have allowed Chelsea to put the lead up to 2 and really see the game out at that point. But it wasn't meant to be, but it was a good indicator that even on the 70th minute plus in the match, Chelsea were not going to sit back idle. They did want to be aggressive on the counter, and when they saw those opportunities with certain creative elements, just like the Pulisic backheel flick to the path of Havertz, these were the type of moves that they wanted to be engaged in. And at the time, we did mention how Fernandinho could come into the game, really maintain possession for City, as well as provide the defensive structure, and even he couldn't stop this pass from Kante to Pulisic, the flick to Havertz, open on goal, and Havertz giving the pass back to Pulisic, and then creating this goal-scoring opportunity that almost went in. As we head into the dying embers of the match, and we go into extra time where there's a 7 minutes added on, we do see certain substitutions take place for the final time. Both Tuchel and Pep use up their third substitution, though they have more remaining if they chose to go that route. And with Pep Guardiola, he went with Raheem Sterling taken out in the 77th minute to put in Sergio Aguero for his 390th appearance for the club, and this would be his final appearance because the very next day after the Champions League Final, he announced that he was going to be going over to Barcelona to join his best mate Lionel Messi. in Catalonia. So with Aguero into the game, you also had Mason Mount taken out of the game to provide more defensive structure via Mateo Kovacic here in the number 17 shirt. So with Mount out and Sterling out, there were more offense being added to the plate for Pep's team and more defense being added to the proceedings from Tuchel's team. As the game progressed into these waning minutes, you did see quite a few Ederson long balls to try to penetrate the defense, get maybe a header or a lucky break in between these two zones here to see if there's a triangle measuring that they could do with precise passing in the area, but with this many men back, it just was not going to be possible. The other thing Chelsea was very, very adept at doing is they would either keep 4 at the back, with Chilwell also here, but the second the ball moved over to the wings, Pulisic would press in, Kovacic would press in as well, and Chilwell would move up to form a 4-man midfield line, at times also 5-man line if Zinchenko, Gundogan, all of them were here. Then Havertz would be the one that made it a 5-man midfield as well, with Pulisic at the tip of the attacking spear as needed. And so with this type of pressing, it was going to be hard to push away Chelsea's defense and really get that easy goal. And so if there was play shifting back to the middle of the pitch, then Pulisic would accordingly move back, everyone would go back into the center, and Chilwell would drop back to get that 5-man defense again working out. In this kind of a setup, you can do the short passing, but at the same time, what City ended up doing towards the end of the game is consistent crossing into the box to see if there was any corners they could get. There were quite a few Kyle Walker long throw-ins where he would go all the way to the edge of the pitch, outside of the pitch, and then really just heave a ball all the way into the box to see if there could be anything magical that could take place. Especially with a striker of Aguero's caliber, historically, you never know. With one lucky break or one scuffed clearance from Chelsea, you could have an Aguero shot on goal, Jesus shot on goal. Foden could also contribute an assist or maybe make some magic happen with his dribbling in the box. But that is not the game that Pep Guardiola and City have been playing all season long, so for them to resort to this at the end was not going to really be the thing that got them the decisive goal and put this game into extra time. So that was how, from a tactical perspective, the Chelsea-Manchester City match unfolded, and this match resulted in Chelsea's second ever Champions League title. And really, you would think that after this point, Roman Abramovich would have to offer Thomas Tuchel a longer-term extension on the contract, but there are some takeaways that I wanted us to keep in mind. So beginning with 1, the question on everybody's mind is, what did Pep think, or did he overthink, and did Tuchel at the same time overachieve? If we tackle what Tuchel did, we can really clearly see that the team that Frank Lampard had, and he should get credit in all of this, by the way, because Lampard took a Chelsea squad with a transfer ban. He took that team, got them into a Champions League spot this season for them to then go through the group stages, at which point he was then let go, and Thomas Tuchel came in and then rode out the rest of the matches and got them the championship. So I think Frank Lampard has a lot to attest to for the success here at Chelsea Football Club, but at the same time, Thomas Tuchel, I think, did overachieve in a sense with the type of squad he had and the players he had. Maybe you would make the argument that with a squad of this type, Chelsea should have been in the top 4 all along, and really by the time that Lampard got sacked, they were mid-table at that point, and in the last few months here in the league, they were able to go into the number 4 slot and get the Champions League rotation for next season as well. But yes, I think he did overachieve given the talent he had, and it'll be interesting to see what he can do with a greater belief in his abilities from this recent success, as well as what does a Thomas Tuchel Chelsea team look like when he has an entire summer to think about, not just from the tactical perspective, but how to improve the team as well as the players in the team and any other players he wants to add or take away. At the same time, with Pep Guardiola, I don't know how much more to this squad you could add or change, other than the fact that there is a glaring philosophical, tactical thing he will have to keep in mind, which is, do we bring in Erling Haaland, Harry Kane, even Kylian Mbappe? He's mentioned at times in the season that City don't have the money. As laughable as that is, they don't have the money to go and buy the next big striker. So we'll see if those words are actually true or not. They have been backed up by the Abu Dhabi investment group, so over time, historically, City have splurged in the transfer market, so it wouldn't be this big adjustment for them to go ahead and buy a Haaland or Mbappe or a Kane and see what they can do in a setup of that kind. But for that to work even tactically, Pep would have to think about how would that person come in and how would those tactics end up changing. So with Harry Kane, for example, he's more of a 9.5, which means he can play either the 10 or the 9. And does that tactically reward a Pep Guardiola type of tactical formation and setup versus an Erling Haaland who's an out-and-out link-up play plus striker? So those are all questions that Pep will have on his mind. But to answer the fact that did he overthink it or not, you would have to look at it from the perspective of would Fernandinho and Rodri, or one or the other, have helped turn the tide. Against Chelsea in the past few matchups, he's played both Fernandinho and Rodri at the same time, and that has led to a loss as well. He has also played Rodri alone, and that has also led to a loss. And Rodri gave away possession as well. In hindsight, it is evident that maybe these two guys would have done something to help turn the tide, but who knows? And to think that he overthought it, I don't quite buy that, because he fielded the type of lineup that if it hits goal, if you get an early goal, then none of this really matters, and he looks like a genius at the end of it for overloading the back five of Chelsea. But unfortunately, it didn't turn out that way, and City was kind of cagey at the beginning. The first 30 minutes went really well, but then the last 60 didn't go very well. But it was very noticeable that when Fernandinho came into the game, the possession of City, the quality of it, as well as the defensive structure both improved. But who's to say that that would have been lasted over the 90 minutes? And there were plenty of opportunities that Timo Werner scoffed at in front of goal. So you add Pulisic as well, who missed the clear opportunity on goal too, just by a narrow margin. So all of those things in combination would have, if they had all gone in, would have meant that Chelsea would have put up 4 on the table. And if that's the case, then would City, even with Fernandinho and Rodri, have enough firepower to surmount that? What is next for Pep Guardiola in Man City? So obviously they'll go back into the lab, reassess what went wrong, what went right. Pep Guardiola is the best coach in world football in my mind, but also just historically he knows where the tactics are, where to adjust them, how to find the right players for his system and get them to play in a way that they're rewarded and their progression through the system is rewarded. And that allows City to possess the ball and be tactically very sound and fundamentally sound. But for all of that to take place, I think the defense, the big step up that they took with Stones and Diaz, has to keep on progressing as well into next season. And with the rest of the team, when you lose an attacker, what do you do when Aguero's out now to Barcelona? And then what do you do with Gabriel Jesus, who's now going to be on the fence if a new striker does come into the fold? Or Jesus may be one of the chips that he puts on the table to allow a slightly less big money transfer to take place with either Borussia Dortmund for Erling Haaland, or PSG for Kylian Mbappe, or Tottenham for Harry Kane. To wrap it all up, we go to the final question, which is what is next for Thomas Tuchel? So there was a bit of a video at the end of the match where you saw Thomas Tuchel meeting Roman Abramovich. Only the Lord knows what was said in between the two, but there is a good chance that Roman now sees where Tuchel is going to stand on things. He likes the way the team was set up. The drastic change from Lampard to Tuchel was very aggressive in a way, but also Tuchel is a very strict disciplinarian, but he also has a very positive side to him as well that the players have so far adjusted well to. And with this massive success in the Champions League, you can see Roman going over time and letting, in the summer transfer window, Tuchel build out the team that he's actually looking for. And that's not to say any of the players that were fielded in the final didn't deserve their spot, but it just means that maybe there are elements to the squad where he wants to make certain adjustments and tweaks, or to increase the depth of the squad as well, so that the rotations of a very rigorous campaign next season across all fronts goes very well and smoothly for Chelsea. So that does bring us to the end of this video for the tactical analysis as well as these final takeaway questions. If you enjoyed the video, think about subscribing to the channel. We're still new, so this is going to take a bit of time to get things off the ground, but we appreciate your patience, comments, feedback, anything you have, leave it in the comments section, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.